Now, I have to tell you, Dr. Murray, I love history. I started at uni. I love that gear. I've been very excited to talk to you. I suppose people think about Sydney as being quite a young city. We've only been around for 230 years. How do you approach the study of a city like Sydney differently to the way you might approach, a European city which has got thousands of years of history? Now, I know, of course, there were people here before Sydney was called Sydney, but in terms of it being a city, how do you approach it differently?
Well, I think Sydney's really interesting as a city because, as you say, we have an ancient heartbeat, and the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation have been around the city of Sydney area for 60,000 years or more, and they've had an ongoing presence even in contemporary Sydney society, and so we can really look at that and explore that. That's one of the things I'm looking at a lot now. But also, Sydney is really interesting because it's established at the cusp of when modern cities are really evolving with the Industrial Revolution and everything. And so actually we're we were at the forefront of city development. And it means we're also at the forefront of other interesting things like the whole burial reform movement, which is what I did my PhD on. And we were the trendsetters in how we buried our dead. So,
How did we bury them differently?
Well, we were amongst the first people to uptake cemeteries as opposed to churchyards. So rather than burying around single denominations around a churchyard, you could actually establish larger cemeteries outside of the city and deal with all of the public health and as well as moral and religious requirements and landscape these large cemeteries. So in fact, Sydney is a really interesting place to study because it's actually at this sort of nexus when a lot of really interesting things are happening with cities.
I know we're such a young nation. We've had such amazing opportunities to kind of roll out ideas that were coming to a fore through the Enlightenment as we were growing. But there's been dark side, the Mount Rennie, rape case. Sydney has, and of course we don't need to, we only need to flick on Channel 9 to see, our, underside chronicled in, on the screen. What's your favourite part of Sydney's history, and what are some of your favourite stories?
Oh man, that's so hard.
It's tough, but I didn't say it was going to be easy. I didn't say come up here and it was going to be easy times.
Can I take this question on notice or something? No.
So what about badasses? Who are our most famous badasses in Sydney?
Well, the obvious ones that everyone really loves at the moment are Tilly Devine and Kate Lee.
What was that about? That was about illegal booze, gambling and prostitution?
Yeah, and the cocaine and... I think...
So we don't think of cocaine as something that was around back then, do we?
Yeah, it was. It was still around back then.
But we don't think about it.
Yeah, that's right. But what's really interesting is that a lot of soldiers in World War I actually got addicted to cocaine to deal with all the trauma, and so when they came back and cocaine was still kind of semi-illegal, they could they all had habit. Oh, well, not all, but some had habits. So there's these kind of really interesting connections between what's happening in underground Sydney and actually what's happening at a national and international stage as well. The impact of World War I played out in so many different ways. The whole fact that we had an underbelly was fostered by the fact that we actually had prohibition of alcohol after 6 o'clock, and that was introduced during World War I, and it wasn't taken away until the 1950s. So it really shaped our culture, those sorts of things.
Of course, and I suppose the 6 o'clock swill is how we know that people would sort of drink, like pack out bars. And I think I even heard once that those little troughs that run on the underside of the bar, those little, do you know what I'm about to refer to here? Is this true?
Yeah. I can't actually confirm that one. My partner, who's also a historian, he's actually really, really interested in pub culture and pub design. We've had some very funny experiences going into pubs when we're interested in pub toilets and all sorts of stuff, because they all get changed in the 1920s and become these really sleek places and interesting places to go in.
He must do a lot of research. How much research does he do on a weekly basis?
I dare not say the kind of
What I was going to say,
internet.
of course, was that people were so packed in the bar and trying to drink so much booze before 6 o'clock is that they would just stand at the bar and urinate down along the wall of the bar, and then that trough would take it away. Now I don't know whether that's true, but I have heard that. Look, tell us a bit more about Sydney, but socially. What are the suburbs that have changed the most? Because I know that Surrey Hills, for example, poor man's Orange, it was a slum, it was an awful place, but now is somewhere where, even a well-connected hipster couldn't get a tiny room for $300 a week. Which are the suburbs that have just kind of changed the most?
Well, I think there's this really interesting process that happens where as different types of public transport get introduced, you get shifts in people where they live. And for much of the 19th century, Sydney was a walking city, it was a pedestrian city. And once you get the railways starting to come in, some of the more well-to-do move out, and so we get railway suburbs, and it's the working class who stay in the city. So we get these kind of concentric circles happening, and the movement of where industry goes, that has a really big impact then on the types of people living in certain areas. And so in the 20th century, with the shifting of industry out to western suburbs and the change of like road transport, that actually really has an impact then on places. And so it's in the same time in the 1960s when road transport and industrial production is moving further out that we actually start to see the start of gentrification in the inner city.
Just final question to you. You've done a lot of research in this city, you know a lot about it. Are we the best city in the world?
We're the best city in the world in many things,
Yes,
except for looking after our archives.
Oh, we don't look after our archives?
Yeah.
Don't we look after our archives?
No, that's what I've been talking about in my TEDx talk.
I thought we were excellent with the Mitchell Library and all that.
Well, the Mitchell Library is a fantastic library, that's true, but that's the state library, and that's capturing, I guess, all of our books and articles and manuscripts. But in terms of our long-term preservation of all the digital records and things that we have, we're really behind the eight ball.
Well, Dr. Lisa Murray, I thought we were the best city in the world. It sounds like we are in a lot of ways, but maybe not all. Can we hear it for the doctor, please?